In the 18th and 19th centuries, the Kingdom of Travancore in southern India enforced a legally binding dress code. Women belonging to the lower Shudra caste were strictly forbidden from covering their chests in public. This mandate had nothing to do with the tropical climate. As historical accounts note, removing the upper cloth was demanded as a token of obeisance. It was a mandatory sign of submission whenever lower caste individuals were in the presence of the royal family or the ruling elite, who were permitted to drape themselves in heavy velvet and jewels. The authorities constructed an ideology of dominance by weaponizing the human body itself. Clothing became a heavily guarded mechanism to maintain a strict visual hierarchy, ensuring you could instantly distinguish an upper caste woman from a lower caste woman with a single glance. State-mandated bare-chestedness served a calculated psychological purpose. By regulating the very skin on a person's body, the ruling class kept marginalized communities in a highly visible, permanent state of inferiority. The restriction on clothing belonged to a larger, systemic web of physical constraints that governed almost every movement a Shudra woman made. Heavy water pots could not be carried safely at the waist. They had to be balanced precariously on the crown of the head. Wearing jewelry of any kind was explicitly banned. Even mourning, widows were subjected to severe regulations, forced to sleep on bare mats, and systematically denied nutritious food. This physical control was reinforced by intellectual suppression. Women were actively barred from education through severe intimidation, specifically told by authorities that daring to learn would cause them to lose their husbands. When a state regulates intellect, physical movement, and the very fabric allowed to cover the skin, organizing a rebellion becomes nearly impossible from the inside. The catalyst for resistance eventually arrived from the outside. Christian missionaries, specifically figures like Charles and Mrs. Mead from the London Missionary Society, entered the region and began directly challenging these laws. They realized quickly that simply telling vulnerable women to cover up would only invite punishment. The missionaries focused instead on building the tangible, structural infrastructure required to support outright defiance. In 1819, Mrs. Mead organized a boarding school for girls in Nagarcoil. By guaranteeing safe boarding, modern instruction, and clothing, the school successfully overcame the initial, very reasonable fears local families had of breaking state customs. To secure their independence further, female missionaries established cottage industries, giving these marginalized women an independent means of earning a livelihood. With modern education sharpening their minds and an economic safety net securing their survival, the lower caste women finally possessed the foundation they needed. They were equipped to confidently break the physical laws enforced by the ruling elite, standing dignified, fully clothed, and entirely unafraid. This chart illustrates the sheer scale of the civilian defiance. By roughly 1856, armed with new moral and economic backing, the movement reached a critical mass. Nearly 3,000 Shudra women committed the ultimate illegal act by publicly wearing an uppercloth. The visual impact was immediate. Thousands of lower caste women walked through markets and streets fully dressed. In doing so, they projected a self-respect that instantly shattered the centuries-old visual hierarchy. Realizing their system of visual distinction was collapsing, the ruling class retaliated with extreme violence. Upper caste mobs organized, setting fire to the very missionary schools and churches that had birthed the resistance. The attacks hit both legally and physically. Police fabricated charges to imprison the missionaries, while mobs roamed the streets, committing the horrific act of violently tearing the blouses off lower caste women in public. This brutal, desperate response from the ruling elite laid bare a fragile truth. A simple piece of woven fabric, when worn by someone told they were less than human, was recognized as a lethal threat to the entire social order. This escalating violent struggle between the entrenched upper castes and the newly empowered Shudra women became officially known in history as the Channar Revolt. Despite the destruction of their schools and the physical attacks in the streets, the women refused to back down. Their relentless pressure created an undeniable crisis, forcing the government of the era to intervene. The state finally yielded, issuing historic orders that explicitly eliminated these specific social inequalities. The law formally affirmed the absolute right of Shudra women to dress in full, modest attire. This legal change was a forced capitulation to a marginalized community that absolutely refused to remain physically subjugated. From that moment forward, Shudra women began moving through public spaces with full dignity. By simply getting dressed, they now existed visually on an equal footing with everyone else in their society. The Channar Revolt established a legal and social precedent for bodily autonomy. This victory was won through a powerful alliance. It required the courage of the oppressed, who risked their lives on the streets, paired with the dedication of missionaries who endured extreme hardships in a foreign land to fight for the rights of the downtrodden. When systemic oppression relies on physical degradation, claiming ownership of one's own body is the mechanism for destroying power. Human dignity is claimed thread by thread.